Contraction of muscle cells generate muscle tension, which provides the force necessary for the muscular system to function. The amount of tension generated depends on such factors as sarcomere length, frequency of stimulation, and the size and number of muscle motor units involved. Sarcomere length determines the degree of overlap between myosin and actin filaments. The more the overlap, the greater the number of cross bridges, the connections between myosin heads and actin. Because tension is generated when myosin heads pull on actin, the amount of tension produced in a muscle fiber depends upon the number of cross bridges formed in a myofibril. A sarcomere length decreases, optimizing the overlap. Tension increases optimal sarcomere length, and overlap produces maximum tension during contraction. Let's take a look at the graph depicting length and tension relationship for skeletal muscle cell. The optimal sarcomere length is about 2.2 micrometers. At this length, the muscle fiber is stretched just above 100% of its resting length. Significantly understretched or overstretched sarcomeres result in lower tension and weaker muscle contraction. Let's explore each one of these zones and see how this affects muscle tension. Let's begin with understretched muscles. In an understretched sarcomere, the ends of actin filaments reach beyond the midpoints of the myosin filaments toward myosin heads that face it in the wrong direction. This hampers the potential for cross bridges, reduces muscle tension, and weakens contraction force. If the length of sarcomere shortens further, the thick filaments collide with Z-discs and distort muscle tension, and contraction force drops sharply. Now let's see overstretched sarcomere. When the sarcomere is stretched beyond the ideal length, there is less overlap between the myosin and actin filaments. As a result, cross bridges formation is substantially diminished, muscle tension decreases, and contraction weakens. In the extreme case, when a sarcomere is stretched to the point where no overlap exists, cross bridges cannot form and muscle tension drops to zero. Muscle contraction depends on the activity of groups of muscle cells. A group of muscle cells controlled by a single motor neuron is defined as a motor unit. When a stimulus of sufficient intensity is applied to a muscle through a single neuron, all the cells in the motor unit respond by producing a single contraction called a muscle twitch. The muscle twitch, which consists of several phases, can be recorded on it and traced on a myogram. Immediately after stimulation, there is a very brief period where no contraction is observed. This is a latent period. Although contraction is not evident during the latent period, the muscle is not inactive. Calcium ions are flowing out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, cross bridges are forming, and the elastic components of the muscle are being stretched. The first discernible force of the muscle initiated the contraction period. When the muscle reaches its greatest point of contraction, it enters a relaxation period. Motor unit size vary among different muscles. Muscles involved in fine control, such as those that move fingers, have smaller motor units. Postural muscles, or those that move large body parts, such as the quadriceps, have large motor units. The amount of twitch contraction force depends on the size of motor unit. Large motor units contain more cells and can therefore produce more tension at the greater contractile force. The amount of tension generated from muscle contraction depends on the frequency of stimulation. A single stimulus produces a muscle twitch. When a second stimulus is applied before the muscle has a time to completely relax from an initial contraction, it exhibits a stronger contraction, and this is called wave summation. Successive stimulation at the same frequency will generate a series of contractions which increase tension. This produces a different kind of a curve known as an unfused tetans. If the frequency of stimulations increase at the point where muscles do not have a chance to partially relax between twitches, the muscle will exhibit a smooth, sustained contraction called a complete tetanus or fused tetanus. Stimulation of fibers in a motor unit generate a muscle tension. The more motor units are involved, the greater the force of contraction. A single threshold stimulus will produce a weak muscle contraction from a single motor unit. When a stronger stimulus is applied to the muscle, more motor units are activated simultaneously. These additional motor units are said to be recruited at an increased tension, resulting in a stronger contraction of the whole muscle. Weaker motor units are recruited first. Stronger motor units are progressively added as more force is required and precision is less important. When all the motor units are activated simultaneously, the muscle generates a maximum contractile force. A muscle under maximum stimulus can only contract for a short time. Alternately, contracting motor units relieve one another and enable sustained contraction. This method of recruitment, known as asynchronous recruitment, allows the individual motor units to recover from contraction. They recover by regenerating more ATP during the period of relaxation. Muscle tone is achieved in a similar manner in a skeletal muscle. Small groups of motor units are involuntarily and alternately activated by sustained and partial contraction that is not strong enough to produce movement. Muscle tone is important to maintain muscle health, and in situations where muscles maintain position or pressure, such as sustained contraction of the neck muscles that hold the head upright, it's very important. And if a neural damage occurs, the muscle tone is diminished and muscle cells become flaccid.